We've now received our takeoff clearance for runway 16 right at Payne Field. As we taxi onto the runway, we'll configure the lights, landing lights, runway turnoff lights, strobe lights, and wing lights on, with the taxi light on the captain's side and the wheel well light on the first officer's side typically being used to indicate that takeoff or landing clearance has been received. There are three types of takeoff typically used in the 737. A rolling takeoff, a static takeoff, and a standing takeoff. For today's purposes, we'll utilize a rolling takeoff as that is the most common, and we'll discuss the static and standing takeoffs in a later tutorial. As we line up with the runway, the thrust levers are advanced to 40% N1 and the engine's allowed to stabilize. Once the engines are stabilized, the toga button should be pressed no later than 2 seconds after the engines have reached their stable state. N1 toga appears on the FMA and forward pressure should be held on the control column. At 80 knots, pressure on the control column can be released, and directional control should be maintained with the rudder pedals. At 80 knots, throttle hold is enunciated on the FMA. And at rotation speed, the control column should be used to rotate the nose at 2 to 2.5 degrees a second nose up.
Positive rate of climb.
The landing gear can be raised with a positive rate established, and the pitch attitude matched to that of the flight director. At 400 feet, a lateral mode can be selected, and at 1,000 feet, VNAV should be selected to accelerate the aircraft. Power is automatically reduced to the climb setting, and the pitch attitude can be reduced to 8 to 10 degrees nose up to allow the airplane to accelerate. As the flap 1 maneuver speed is reached, the flaps can be selected up, and the after takeoff checklist completed. With the aircraft in trim, Command B can be selected, and I will now execute the after takeoff checklist. Wing anti-ice is not required. Engine anti-ice is also not required. The packs and engine bleeds are auto and on respectively. The aircraft is pressurizing, as evidenced by the differential pressure needle climbing on the outside scale. The engine start switches can be turned off, and the APU is verified off. On the main instrument panel, the auto brakes can be turned off. The flaps are verified up with no lights, and the landing gear selected off. The fuel can be checked to verify it matches roughly what we had for takeoff, and the after takeoff checklist can be completed. After takeoff checklist. Flaps, up. Landing gear, up and off. Packs, auto. Engine bleeds are on. Pressurization panels been checked. Engine start switches are as required, and the APU is verified off. The after takeoff checklist is complete. For today's purposes, we'll assume that air traffic control has cleared us to our final cruise altitude of flight level 190, and that can be selected in the MCP. We will also assume that air traffic control has now cleared us direct to the Seattle VOR. For this, from the legs page, select Seattle, place it at the top of the waypoints list using LSK1 left, and execute the change. Finally, select LNAV on the mode control panel and observe LNAV on the FMA. The aircraft is now navigating laterally towards Seattle and the rest of the flight plan route. As a technique, use the heading bug to track the airplane's heading in case air traffic control assigns a heading as opposed to a navigation fix. As the airplane reaches 10,000 feet, it will automatically accelerate to our programmed climb speed, today 280 knots. The retractable landing lights can be retracted, the taxi light turned off, and the wheel well light turned off. Verify, passing 10,000 feet, once again that the cabin is pressurizing by observing the big needle move on the differential scale. And that concludes the takeoff tutorial. We'll come back mid-climb to complete the climb checklist and prepare for descent.